When people hear the word sex, most immediately think of pleasure. But if you look at human history, biology, and psychology, you'll realize something much deeper. Sex is not just an activity. Sex is a foundational force that shaped human evolution, social structures, and mental health. And the first person who boldly said this in a scientific way was Sigmund Freud. But the real question is, why did Freud reach such a radical conclusion? And how does history and human biology actually support his statement? Today, we're breaking it all down. If we travel far back in time, all the way to early human evolution, sex wasn't a private act like it is today. Sex was a survival strategy. Imagine living thousands of years ago. No houses. No governments. No systems. Just small tribes trying to survive wild animals, harsh climates, famine, disease. In that environment, the ability to reproduce wasn't optional. It was the key to existence. If a tribe didn't grow, they couldn't hunt safely. They couldn't defend their territory. Knowledge couldn't be passed on. And the tribe would eventually disappear. So sex wasn't a personal choice. It was a collective survival mechanism. When we move forward into ancient civilizations like Greece, we find the concept of eros, not just romantic love, but a creative, life-driving force. Plato even wrote, "Eros is the force that drives humans toward wholeness." For them, sexuality wasn't shameful. It was a source of creativity, connection, and civilization. Then in ancient Rome, sex was intertwined with politics, alliances, social status, and power. It was both a personal and societal tool. Across Mesopotamia, India, and Egypt, sex showed up in fertility rituals, seasonal festivals, and myths about gods and goddesses. Deities like Ishtar, Aphrodite, and Shiva symbolized the connection between sexuality, creation, and prosperity. So even before science existed, humans understood one thing. Sex is a fundamental force in shaping society. Now let's jump forward to the late 1800s and early 1900s, the time Sigmund Freud lived. Europe during this era was heavily influenced by Victorian culture, one of the most sexually repressive periods in history. In Victorian society, talking about sex was taboo. Women were expected to have no desire. Masturbation was considered sinful and harmful. Many women were diagnosed with hysteria. Doctors were discouraged from discussing sexual trauma. It was a world that silenced sexuality. Freud was one of the first people who dared to look beneath the silence. He noticed something remarkable. When sexuality is suppressed, it doesn't disappear. It transforms into psychological symptoms. Freud worked with patients suffering from anxiety, paralysis, tremors, panic attacks, hallucinations, and strange behaviors. And over time, he discovered a pattern. Behind these symptoms were emotional conflicts tied to suppressed sexual feelings, desires, or trauma. One of the most famous examples is the case of Anna O. She experienced paralysis, tremors, speech difficulties, and hallucinations. But as she began expressing long-suppressed emotions, including those related to sexuality, her symptoms gradually improved. Freud saw this over and over again. And this led him to one of the most controversial statements in the history of psychology. Sexuality is the central point of human life. Now this didn't mean sex is everything. Freud meant something deeper. The sexual drive, what he called the libido, is one of the core sources of human psychological energy. According to Freud, libido doesn't just produce sexual behavior. It can transform into creativity, ambition, art, work, achievement, and even aggression. Sexual energy is essentially life energy. This idea was shocking in his time, but it laid the foundation for many parts of modern psychology. Modern psychology doesn't agree with everything Freud said. But two of his ideas remain highly relevant. 1. Human sexuality is a fundamental part of identity. Our relationships, intimacy, and emotional life are shaped by how we understand sexuality. 2. Repressed sexuality creates psychological stress. Research now shows that shame, fear, or excessive repression around sexual thoughts or identity can lead to anxiety, depression, and relationship dysfunction. In a world where people are often confused or conflicted about sexuality, Freud's ideas remind us that sexuality is natural, not something to be feared or rejected. So, why is sex important? Because from the very beginning of human history, sex was not just a personal act, it was a strategy for survival. Because ancient civilizations saw sexuality as a source of creativity, unity, and power. Because in the Victorian era, repressing sexuality caused widespread psychological issues. And because biologically, sex activates systems in the brain and body that support emotional health, bonding, recovery, and overall well-being. Like Freud said, sexuality is the central point of human life. Not in a vulgar way, but as a reminder that it is a natural, powerful part of what makes us human. If you enjoy historical and scientific explanations like this, follow Vibe for Fit for more content that makes you healthier, smarter, and more self-aware.